Scania today. So good afternoon, Asia Pacific. Good morning, Sweden. And welcome to the Swedish Chamber of Commerce in APAC. My name is Lisa Ferreton, and I'm the General Manager of Swedcham Singapore. And I'm sorry for you who were looking forward to seeing my colleague Fredrik Boyer from Swedcham Taiwan leading this event today. As you know, we live in a turbulent world currently, and things happen unexpectedly. And the pandemic is still creating havoc around the world, and this is very much so in the Boyer family, but this week. But then it's good to have a big APAC network that can help out, and we very much support each other, and we wish Fredrik a speedy recovery. So today we have with us member companies from 10 different Swedchams in the APAC region. We are expecting around 150 to 200 people dialing into this session. And the pandemic has brought us a lot of bad, I guess. Nobody can deny that. But here is the positive thing. The collaboration between the different Swedchams in our huge region has completely transformed during the past 2 years. And we are today a very collaborative network of chambers with one purpose only: to promote and celebrate the value propositions of Swedish businesses in the region. And this is our second session of Swedcham's new APAC CEO series, where we invite group CEOs from our diverse fleet of flagship Swedish companies to give their perspectives on where they are heading with within their specific industry and market, obviously with a specific eye on APAC. And today our focus will be on the transportation industry, as we are honored to have with us Mr. Christian Levin, President and CEO of Scania Group. And I would also like to say welcome back to Rima Bhattacharya. Rima was actually with us for our first CEO talk in February with Electrolux, and she did such a fabulous job that we have invited her back to expand and deepen the conversation here today with Christian Levin. Rima is head of Asia Risk Insight at the Risk Maplecroft Singapore office, and she plays a key role in expanding the firm's services in the ESG risk space and works alongside clients to strengthen their in-house ESG processes. And we know her quite well. She's a frequent contributor in the media on ESG and business topics, as well as broader political economic trends in APAC. So now I have the great pleasure to introduce to you Christian Levin. Christian has worked in the transportation sector for approaching 3 decades, since he started his career in 1994 as a trainee at Scania. In 1997, he took up his first management position, and as of May last year, Christian Levin is now the president and CEO of Scania, and as of October last year, he's also CEO of TRATON Group. Scania, for those who don't know, founded in 1911 with a focus on commercial vehicles, so heavy lorries, trucks, and buses, today employs 54,000 people worldwide and operates in over 100 countries, with a purpose to drive the shift towards a sustainable transport system, creating a world of mobility that is better not just for business, but also for society and the environment. And Christian, we know that you have a lot on your plate, and we feel extremely privileged to get these 60 minutes with you. You are leading a Swedish MNC, which truly drives innovation in low carbon transportation solutions with an almost startup-like entrepreneurial approach. And we know that you have a strong vision and a passion for how you would like to see Scania lead the way into a net zero future within your industry. And our hope is today that we, among other things, will get to hear about what they call the secret sauce, which differentiates Scania from many other global organizations. This secret sauce goes under the official name of the Scania Way and is what contributes to very low attrition rates and an impressive score on sites like Glassdoor, which is a site where current and former employees anonymously can review employer companies. So we are hoping to have a relaxed and yet interesting conversation here today, both between Christian and Rima, but also with the audience. So if you have questions or comments, send them over via the chat here on Zoom, and we will do our best to bring them up during the last 30 minutes we are together here. So without further ado, welcome Christian Levin, the floor is yours.
Wonderful, thank you. And that was a fantastic introduction. So I feel that now the pressure to deliver something extraordinary. No, jokes apart, I love conversations, and I really hope that we can have this as a two-way, and I really look forward to Rimas and all of your questions. So let's jump into my introduction part, and I'll try and keep it brief so that we really have time for conversation. But please also interrupt if there is something where you really want to make a comment or a question. We can take the next slide, which is...
签订为期6年的委托贷款合同，并且在委托等合约到期时期6年后本期。
there it is. Yeah, so Lisa already mentioned it in the introduction, but many companies have a sustainability strategy. I would say that we go further. We have a sustainable strategy, I would say. So, and to really underline that, we decided back in 2015 when we set out to make our 2020 strategies to say that, okay, we really need to make, I mean, we really are part of the problem in our industry. We account for 5.2% of the world's CO2 emission. So on the global warming side, which started to come in focus back then, we really said we need to do something, and we have the heritage and we have the muscles to do it. And then we established what we call the Scania purpose, which is kind of overlaying to our strategy, and this is to drive the shift towards sustainable transport systems, saying that, okay, we can't do everything ourselves, but we can be the one in our industry that shows the way and make sure that we get rid of this 5.2% of the world's CO2 emissions. That's a broad and bold statement, and we can hope we can jump to the next slide. And a way to make this concrete, and I would say the best model that we have found so far to follow up and at the same time put pressure on yourself to deliver, and when we talk CO2, is the Science-Based Target Initiative. So we were the first one in our industry to apply for and also to be approved for science-based targets. And here are our targets, saying that we would reduce our CO2 emissions from scope 1 and 2, our own operations and our suppliers' operation, by 50% until 2025 compared to 2015. And by 20% in our customers' operation, meaning the use of our products, which means the emissions that our vehicles emit when they are with our customers. And that second promise is a huge undertaking because it's partly beyond our control, of course. I understood that you had Jonas Samuelsson from Electrolux at your last CEO talk, and it's a coincidence, of course, but I'm meeting him this afternoon, where we're meeting up with Swedish media to talk about the importance to collaborate through the value chain to make a difference. Because whatever we do as a company, and in this group, I can then say that the 50%, we are more than well underway. We are ahead of the curve. It is, of course, a challenge, but it's not difficult. The problem is that in our line of business, more than 95% of the emissions are coming from our vehicles when they are in use with our customers. So the 20%, this is where the challenge is. And how do you change that if your customers are not having the same purpose and the same strategy as we have? And that's unfortunately the fact that very many logistic and transport companies are living with small margins, very conservative, short contracts, need high flexibility. So for them, it's not at all obvious. And then you need to go to the next step in the value chain. And then you are, for instance, with Electrolux, a big transport buyer who says that we also do science-based targets. And they were even before us, to be honest. They were one of the first in Sweden amongst the big industrials. Then they need to work with their, what is their scope 1 and 2, which is partly transport. And for many of them, transport is the biggest part, if you look at big retailers, for instance. So we work a lot with transport buyers in order for them to put pressure on the value chain so that we can then come with a solution together. So that was a fun coincidence. We can take the next picture again. Now we went backwards, I think. There you are. So sustainability at Scania is, of course, more than CO2, even if I would say that in our particular business, this is the biggest challenge and the most important one that we need to address with urgency. And that goes about doing the things right. So it's of course, delivering vehicles with new technology, And here we have developed a palette of both alternative fuels, so everything from ethanol to biodiesel, biogas, over to electrified solution, hybrid, plug-in hybrids, and then also, as since last year, full electric vehicles. But it's also about energy efficiency. And we have seen through our connected vehicles that we can do a lot. And here we have very many good examples in Asia where we can do a lot with driver behavior by offering driver feedback, driver service, real-time feedback in the vehicle on how to behave in order to drive down energy efficiency. And not to forget that, of course, the best transport from a CO2 point of view is the transport that is never done. Meaning that helping also with data for logistic planning to make smarter transport is also a big step. I also want to mention safety, that we work a lot, and here I must also give credit to all of you guys on the Chamber of Commerce side who are helping us with contacts with governments to drive safe transport. And we've done, I think we have, for instance, in China, we have fantastic examples where we have been able to influence the legislation on what type of vehicles you are allowed to put on the road, and thereby making the roads so much safer. But it's also about doing things right. So the green boxes here on the slide, which is then going on things of perhaps more soft character, such as the importance to work with inclusion in the company, making sure everyone is heard, regardless of background, regardless of being a minority or not, because that leads to diversity, and diversity leads to better decision making, better analysis. It was mentioned here in the introduction also that we work a lot with health and safety, and really aim at 100% health attendance. We're not talking so much about sick leave. We really measure the attendance and make sure that we work with people being able to come to the office because they feel safe and they feel well. That is then going further on into human and labor rights, which is of course working in non-democratic countries is always an issue and something that we take very seriously. And that is also close connected to ethics, both where you buy and where you sell, of course. And we have increasingly started to work with really analyzing and understanding our value chains, both in the front, so to say, and in the back. So we have to say sustainability from the broader concept, but I must admit that when it comes to our top priority, it's really to solve the global warming, or our part of the global warming, and showing the way there. We can take the next slide, and yeah, okay. Here is basically what I quickly was talking us through, just to give the complete picture. To give you also a little bit of introduction of our company, what are we and what is our business model? And it was mentioned our secret sauce, so I will try to talk about our secret sauce. This is a very fact-based picture. Where are we located? And you see that focusing on Asia, then that we have quite a lot of industrial footprint, because we have KD, so-called KD, so knockdown assembly factories, located in several countries. But foremost, we have, and that's, I suppose, the great part here of the map, we have very good local sales and service organization attendance. So, and what is differentiating us from the others is that we mainly own it ourselves. Normally, you're represented by someone from another company, another legal entity, but we have chosen to integrate forward, meaning that we control the importer level, but also the dealer level ourselves, and that's quite unique in at least in our industry, which gives us a uniqueness in the interface that we have as a company. We have a direct interface to our customers, which gives us numerous advantages also when it comes to our sustainability work. And I would say if it's unique in the industry, it's even more unique in Asia. So where some of our competitors own importers and dealerships, they predominantly do that in Europe. where it's, I would say, very much unique to have that integrated business model. And what we see coming out of that is excellent results in terms of services and how we are perceived by our customers in many Asian markets as by far best service provider, which I'm very, very proud of. And I think that is one of our differentiating factors and part of that secret sauce. I think on the next slide, we have more about the secret sauce. The core of our strategy, I always say, is the Scania way. This house was established very many years ago when we started to work with Toyota. We work with Toyota both in Japan, but even more so in the US. We follow their establishment there and saw how important it was to work with common values and with common principles. So what the outer world thought was a very strong focus on methods was actually not right. What Toyota made was really to focus on common values and then a way to think. And if you have a common way of thinking throughout an organization, it doesn't matter if you're in Taiwan or if you're in Sweden, you come to similar methods, but you don't need to steer that. These methods can be developed locally. And then, of course, a strong focus on the result coming out based on the method, but not as in many American companies. This was interesting seeing the difference between General Motors and Toyota that we followed closely, where the Americans were jumping directly to the result and then not being happy about the result and continuing to focus on the result itself rather than saying, so why do we have the result we have? Well, because we chose a certain method. And that method was derived out of a way of thinking. So if our results are not good, of course, we need to go back and think, why are they not good? And do the 5 whys and the plan, do, check, act, and realize that perhaps we need to change the method. And then that's where we put the focus. But if you do that several times and still don't achieve good results, well, maybe then we're thinking the wrong way. And then you need to go back to the principle level. And that is what is on the yellow part of the house here, which is very much a lean or agile in the new way of thinking, lean agile world, where you really work with well, we call it demand-driven output or the pool. And based on that, you create a normal situation, you make sure you deliver the right things and you continuously improve, and then you spin around this. So this is, if we can make this work in every part of the world, the thinking model to the right and the house to the left with our values, then my conviction is that it doesn't matter what we put in the strategy PowerPoint slides. If we have this right, then we will be very successful. So I would say this is a very strong part of our secret sauce. If we take the next slide, I think, if I remember right, that we also have the business model. And this might not look like any rocket science, but it's very bold and it's recognized by our customers because it says that our target is to make our customers more profitable. So it doesn't start with saying we should be more profitable. It says, as most company strategies, it says our customers should be more profitable. If we manage to make them more profitable, then we are successful. And obviously, if we can make them more profitable, that there is something for us. So, and we illustrate that with this balance, saying that we need to work with our customer cost, of course, that's what everyone is doing in our industry. How can you lower fuel consumption? How can you lower repair costs? But it's as much working with the customer's top line. So making sure that the customer can actually invoice more. And here the sustainability dimension has proven to be very, very interesting. So for instance, shifting from a combustion diesel engine over to a gas engine and hopefully then biogas, you get a quiet vehicle. And a quiet vehicle in many cities is allowed to operate more hours. Hence, you can invoice more. So just a small, silly example of how you can also work with the customer's revenue side. And then we talk not about total cost of ownership, we talk about total operating economy. And again, we know that if that is successful, there is something also for us here on the right side of the balance. And we have the highest prices in the industry by far. And to me, that is the proof point that customers are prepared to pay it because there's something in it for them. Another super important and very old part of our secret sauce is the modular system, and that's on the next slide. This was invented by fantastic people in the Scania organization already back in the 40s. And it answered to the eternal question in the automotive industry on how to combine scale, mass industrialization, which takes down cost, undoubtedly, but you have to combine that with tailor making, because especially in our industry where we are not, we are not supplying a vehicle, we are supplying a production equipment into a logistics system that should deliver day and night. Then it needs to be tailored exactly to the operation of our customers. Again, back to the business model, in order for them to be successful, have low costs and high revenues. And the modular system provides the answer. It's of course being copied by basically every company in the industry, but no one has reached as far as we have done in terms of covering the whole vehicle, in terms of going deep down to every single, well, literally we go down to bolts and nuts because we have modularized the bolts and nuts on the vehicle, but also into services. So when we talk about modular solutions, it's really for customers to not only tailor make the vehicle, but also tailor make the service contract, the repair contract, the insurance, the financing. Super important part is the financing, so that it fits exactly to the needs. And that's another reason why customers are prepared to pay a little bit more for Scania, and sometimes a lot more than what they do to other vehicles. In this, and we are now on the product, we can also provide performance steps. Maybe I should say that there are three principles. There are many Scania people in this call. I should say the three basic principles for a well-functioning modular system is standardized interfaces. It's same need, identical solution. That's why we only have one windscreen and Volvo has 5. And finally, it's about well-balanced performance steps. And we can here use also performance steps in order to optimize the life length of the vehicle. And talking about Asia again, it's interesting to see that the highest mileage and highest utilization in the world we find in some of our Asian countries. And of course, China is here sticking out with 3 drivers around the clock operation. And then we can really optimize the vehicles for that, never standing still, just being in the workshops 8 times a year, and including then the services. Okay, I think we can skip to the next slide, which should be a little bit then about, okay, if this is the secret sauce, what do we need to add to the sauce to make it a good meal also in the future? And we are of course exposed to tremendous change right now. Our industry is challenged by new technologies made available, and of course that drives new players to the scene, competitors, but also partners. And here are the 3 most significant areas. It goes about connectivity in the middle. It's something we started with first in the industry. We standardized already more than 10 years ago. So all our equipments are connected and it's included. So it's not something that costs extra. But what has then come later is through the digitalization advancements, automation. So what you see here is our axle truck. It's a mining truck that is, and there's no cabin you can see for the driver, so completely automated. And I will come back to that. But of course, this is a huge technology possibility, as the driver is often the most or the second most important part of our customers' cost equation. And then electrification. And electrification is happening at the speed of light. It's really going fast, and it's super interesting to see how the total cost of ownership parity between a combustion vehicle and an electric vehicle, market by market, segment by segment, application by applications, is coming closer and closer. And in several cases, several markets, there's already cheaper to operate an electrified vehicle, even though it's 2 to 3 times more expensive to buy. So this is where we're heading, and this is where we put today way more than 50% of our research and development resource. It's to cover and be the best in these 3 technology areas. I promise to come back on next slide, something on autonomous, because it's always super interesting to talk about. So if we take the next slide, you see 2 examples, which are still show trucks, but we should And of course, this is a promising technology, and some claims it will always be promising. But we have today trucks operating in Sweden between Södertälje and Jönköping, of course with safety driver, but it operates autonomously. We have the right now to drive not only highways, but also on smaller roads where we are operating autonomously. So somewhere in the frame 2025, we really think that we can start to operate with real business on autonomous platforms on highways and in mining operations. This is where we really see that these technologies can fly. We can take the next slide again, and that's just, I can flip it quickly because it's just showing that the world is connected, and that goes for every industry, and we have today more than 600,000 connected vehicles throughout the world, and this is a fantastic source of information for our customers and for ourselves. We make bold commitments when it comes to electrification. So by 2030, we have set out to deliver half of our volume as electric. And here is both a bus and a truck, illustrating what we have already coming out of our assembly line as serial production. So it's no hocus pocus, no special prototypes. This is serial production as per today. More than 1,000 vehicles sold already, and the order book is growing. So super interesting development on electrification. And I should say markets not only in Europe, but also throughout Asia now start to take up the challenge to sell these vehicles. Okay, then we should say something about the biggest market in the world and the biggest market in your region, which is China, which is of course not uncomplicated, but the market that we know very well. We have been there for more than 60 years. And we are present also in China with captive importer and also dealer organization. But what makes it interesting now to go to China with also industrial establishment, which we have set out to do, is that we really see that on one hand we need more production capacity. We have been sold out, you could say literally Scania, the last 3-4 years. Or at least we have had peaks where we could not deliver to customers because we lack production capacity. We see the world is regionalizing. We see that it's increasingly difficult to be a small global, small in brackets, but a small global company, where we will have to be more self-sufficient in the different regions of the world. And of course, one such region is Asia. And therefore, we have decided that rather than building out more industrial capacity in Latin America or in Europe, we will build it out in Asia. And our choice has come to China, partly because China's internal market is the biggest in the world, but partly also because there is a sub-supplier base that is very well suited for our industry, as it is a very big industrial or automotive production nation in the world. So and take the sustainability angle that is also represented here on the slide. If we can contribute to improving and driving the shift to more sustainable transport systems in China, the impact is bigger than anywhere else on the globe, because we talk about up to 1 million new vehicles. And actually, yeah, last year was extreme, but China was more than half of the sales of heavy commercial vehicles in the world. So the smallest improvement in China makes the biggest improvement for the world. And we know we can make an impact. We have had fantastic improvement when it comes to road legislation and to sustainability legislation in China already by just being a small player, but showing the way. And with industrial presence, we think that we can be a substantially bigger player, but it's of course also to supply the region with shorter delivery times, because it is of course a hazard. And I think all the Scania colleagues here representing us in Asia can testify that it is a hassle to have to wait for a customer ordered vehicle in this beautiful modular system that comes in 6 months or 9 months, or right now even 18 months. That's not a good way to do business. And of course, with the factory much closer, we can change that completely. A third and last reason to really be in China is that a lot of the technologies that I talked about that is part of the future, so connectivity, electrification and autonomous, China is maybe not yet, but they are set out to be the leader in the world. And therefore we need to tap into people and competencies that is also coming out of the Chinese market. And that's where we have decided. And I think there is a next slide that shows our production investment. So we're aiming to, and I think it's today actually the groundbreaking ceremony, where we're aiming to build up our factory in Rugao, outside, I think it's 150-200 kilometers northwest of Shanghai. I haven't been there because of the lockdowns, and I'm very glad that they are now easing up so that we can put full speed into this. So construction, yeah, here it says groundbreaking June 10th, and construction is then scheduled to begin. And then we will try to make this Chinese speed, not Scania speed, but Chinese speed, and have a factory here up and running already by the end of 2024 to supply China and the region. And I think the next slide is actually a map of where we will then be located, and of course close to the big ports, which is super important for the logistics of the region. So I think I'm looking at the watch. Yeah, I think I'm rather good on time, which is unusual being me. It's because we are on Teams and you don't interrupt me with questions. Yeah. But that is good because that gives us the half hour that we were setting out for having a conversation. So I stop there and say thanks for listening and look forward to having a discussion.
Thank you very much, Christian, for setting the scene and giving us this interesting overview. We have got some feedback from the audience, but we will hold on a bit and give the word to Rima first. As a risk analyst, what is the first question or reflection that comes to your mind when listening to Christian?
Thanks, Lisa. First of all, hello, everybody. It feels great to be back here today. And it was really wonderful to hear Christian speak so passionately about sustainability and Scania's vision and priorities for the future. So I've spent a better part of the decade talking to companies, dancing around boardrooms about risk and corporate strategy. And since I have Christian for the next half an hour, so I've compiled my list of tough questions. I think questions which I call every political risk analyst wants to ask a global CEO. So on that note, Christian, when I was just preparing for this conversation, I saw so many interesting things that you said during COP26. You spoke very passionately about the green globalization that's yet to come. And there was a sense of, I'm sure you'll agree, a kind of tentative positivity and progress that, things are moving, companies, countries making big pledges and all of that. But the geopolitical events of the last few months have altered that net zero picture. I mean, with the Ukraine crisis, there is a big energy crisis also upon us in Asia. It's about inflation and food scarcity. I think my first question is, as a global transportation leader, what are some of the strategic challenges of coming up with a sustainability strategy in a world that is so topsy-turvy and also decarbonizing in an unequal pace?
Oh, that's of course what we struggle with now every day, to say how can we continue with the speed that we've had and even accelerate with the, as you say, the very good spirit we had in COP26 in November, despite the terrible things that are happening in Ukraine and Russia as a consequence, going to be completely isolated. And of course I don't have a crystal ball, but one thing I touched upon, I think we need as a consequence to be more regionalized and make sure that we can work with different strategies in different regions, which is going to be more costly for us. But on the other hand, we're already on that path. So talking about there's not one size fits all. I had a trip here. I've not been to Asia for a long time, so I don't have a good example out of Asia, unfortunately, but I still will tell you I was traveling Latin America a couple of weeks ago. And it was so interesting to move from the east to the west and see that Argentina, Brazil all in for biogas, the biggest biogas plants in the world, and saying that with their local conditions, this is the solution. Moving over to Chile, and everything is electrified, you know, and they have decided firmly to go. They have a lot of solar, a lot of wind, and they have a great grid. So what we need to adapt, I mean, we need them to make sure that we have both biogas trucks and we have electric trucks and buses that can fit into these systems. And then we need to work with the grid and the grid partners in Chile, and in Brazil, we need to work with a supply system of biogas. So I think that is one aspect. More flexibility is needed, more investments will be needed. No, there's no other way. The other is, of course, the conflict in itself. What does it do now when energy prices are exploding? And especially in Europe, where fossil gas will not be available. But I think, and I'm a born optimist, of course, because I'm coming out of the commercial side of the organization, but I think this will accelerate the transition. I think that electrification will happen faster than what we said. And we already see tendencies. We see countries like Poland that were not very keen on getting rid of their fossil dependencies. Well, of course, they had a sustainability agenda, and they have committed also in COP26, but it was, you know, under pressure. Now they really want to drive. So I never had so many requests before us in Poland for electrified buses and electrified trucks and help with the grid. And so something good could come out of that horrible situation that we see in Ukraine, and that could be a faster transition, specifically over to electric vehicles. But you're right, the risks are obviously bigger, and this was not on any of our risk maps, to be honest. None of us were counting on a war in Europe. None of us was counting on lockdown. None of us was counting on semiconductor shortages. So it's been terribly difficult. And if you ask my colleagues on this call, they will say that we have been lousy, the industrial part of the organization, to actually get products through. Right. But this is the reason. This is the reason why there has never been so many disturbances in our global systems as there is right now. And we have to make damn sure that sustainability output is not suffering the way that product output is right now.
Right. Fabulous. You spoke about a regional strategy, but when you have ambitious global sustainability targets, that's predicated on all different parts of your business moving at a similar pace, year-on-year progress. But there are so many externalities in your supply chain that you can't predict anymore. You know, access to raw materials, so many other things. So when you still have to meet that target in the next 2 decades, which means like a complicated dance of so many other global operations, how do you keep progress and you kind of keep taking one step at a time? You spoke about China. China is going through so many complicated things with the pandemic, with its own energy sort of consumption target setting and all kinds of things. So how do you still keep on that target, and you kind of keep at the ambitious plans that you have for Scania?
Yeah, if we take again the top priority, which is the CO2, then the science-based target has, of course, forced us to set up a very thorough measurement system, and which I follow it quarterly through a sustainability board in the company, where the executive board plus a huge number of experts are present. But every function follows this in detail, and here it's impressive to see, for instance, in Asia, how we in the workshop operation, which is part of our scope 1 and 2, how we now take a much more firm grip on our energy consumption, efficiency of the workshops, but that we buy green energy, and that's not always available. And then you have to find ways to be even more aggressive than on the energy consumption side, and how you use your cooling and heating equipment and so on and so forth. And there's a very consistent plan driving that down. When it comes to our industrial establishment, for instance, in China, then we're working now with the authorities, and we have a good chance of getting all of the energy supplied to the factory through a biogas plant that the authorities have accepted to build. And of course, that's another way to try to build up. And I think that is the answer to your question. Local partnership is our way to navigate through this crisis, because there will not be one partner or one global solution that can help us in all these difficult landscape. We will have to be with Chinese partners in China. We will have to be with Taiwanese partners in Taiwan, South Korea, you name it. And solutions will be different. And therefore, I think our delegated model, where we have a very strong authority responsibility with the local leadership, and our thinking model that I was talking about before, where we basically say, as long as you follow our principles, do it the way you can, the best way you can locally, is a winning formula in this super difficult environment. But the measurement when it comes to CO2, that goes through science-based targets, and that's the same for everyone, but the methods will differ.
Right. Interesting. You spoke about Asia and the local environment. Now, Asia's regulatory and operational environment is drastically different from Europe's.
Yes,
and as you would have, and you know this, and you've addressed this, as the region lags behind its global peers when it comes to protectionist regulations, quality infrastructure. There's so much infrastructure still coming up in Asia. New regulations for emerging technologies that are still not there. So how is that? How do you sort of work around that? Because the playbook is still being written, and even partnering with local partners has its own reputational and other kinds of integrity challenges in operating in this environment. So how do you navigate that, I think, as a global company?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And I don't have a complete answer, because I don't really know, to be honest, how we do it in each and every country. But one part I mean, I touched upon, that's our culture, that's our soft values, that we really are here to do good. We really want to be the example. And when we partner up, of course, we partner up with companies. We, of course, have tools to do counterpart due diligence and really check that we are partnering with companies that share our same values and that also want to improve for the better. That, of course, where we have a big challenge is on the human rights side, to make sure that the supply base that we find is living up to our standards. And then it's not only about CO2, it's about all the green things that I showed on my second slide. And there we have built up a system of audit, where we audit not only the first tier, but we also go deeper down into the chain. And there we need to be super hard and say that, yes, you might be the cheapest, but you don't live up to our standards, and therefore you will not supply to us. And there, I think that's another example how we can be a positive force and how trade can actually help the world to be a better place. Right. And that's one reason why isolation is never the answer to the sustainability, global sustainability issue. Right. It has to come through trade partnerships, but it also has to come from us putting demands and saying, if you're part of our value chain, then this is how we do it. And of course, in some cases, it means that we go wrong, and then we have to cut that relation with the financial consequences that has for both parties. So it makes us perhaps more powerful than we think if we use this right.
Right. I mean, that leads me very nicely to the next question, Christian, because I think Southeast Asia is poised to make the most of this shift in global auto players looking for new markets for raw materials. But as you said, human rights, the supply chain issues are, and the ESG issues involved in mining and so many other things is just it's an elephant in the room. Do you think it's going to be a setback for the Asian markets? What's your prediction, given the challenges of operating in Asia, of how the EV or emerging green technologies in the transportation sector, where they'd likely go in the next decade?
No, I don't. I think it's the opposite. I think it's a fantastic chance for Asia, having a lot of the natural resources available, to not just make that an export product, but make sure to excel in your home market and capture more of that value chain. Because I think that is what is many times has created setbacks for countries, where they just explore that they happen to have lithium, or they happen to have cobalt, or happen to have the new materials. I mean, in partnerships, build up more value add, and go also for, and that's when I talk to politicians, also make your own country a showcase, because that's giving a double effect to having this gift, being gifted of having the raw materials. Education is, of course, a huge part of this. I mean, we constantly seek engineers who have understandings of these, and wherever we find them, they are most welcome to us. And of course, we would like to have local engineers where we are. So it's also a very difficult question to answer. But I don't see that Asia would come out later, or would have to come out later. And there are shining stars already in Asia that could serve as example. I mean, Singapore is probably the most advanced example in the world. you know, and the way they think about it, I'm super impressed every time I meet people from, and that doesn't matter whether they are in you know, in industry or in transport or in energy. In Davos, I had a fantastic discussion with a group of finance, high-level finance people, and the ones who are the most advanced were coming out of Singapore, because they really understand how the financial sector could be the catalyst of driving the shift in all other sectors.
Right.
And they do it. They do it, and they do it together with policymakers. So, but the policymakers are important. I mean, I should say 2 words about that, and that's why I was in Glasgow and why I was in Davos 2 weeks ago. You know, it is about creating the preconditions. We will solve all the technical stuff. We will set up systems that work. There's no doubt about that. We are ready as an industry. We could take out all the carbon dioxide emissions from our industry, or the most of it, within a much shorter time frame than what we promised, if only we can make sure that there's incentives in place for our customers, and that there is either a biogas or an electric grid that our customers trust in. And as you know, and as we have discussed in many other forums, we also invest ourselves in that, just to show the point, not because we want to be a supplier of electricity. That's not part of my business model. I cannot afford it, but to show that someone needs to do it. And we will do it just to show it's possible. And then we hope for partnership there as well.
Right. But Christian, government engagement, especially in emerging markets in Asia, or engaging with policymakers is a bit tricky. It's a double-edged sword, because there's so many other motivations. There's elections. There's also this new drive to launch their own domestic champions to the world stage in a key emerging sector. So there are so many challenges that I think foreign companies face, market entry challenges in this space generally in Asia, in emerging markets. Has that been your experience? What are your thoughts on that? Because again, these are the countries with real potential, whether it's Indonesia, whether it's Malaysia, you know, Vietnam, India for that matter.
No, India, we have, of course, very, very bad experience. Yes, we had a lot of bad experience that way. And of course, it's always spelled protectionism or nationalism.
Yeah,
you know, that's where it starts, the problem. And then, of course, you can add, but that's in every country, that you short election periods, and you know, people want to take short-term benefits on the long-term expense.
Yeah.
So how to maneuver there? Yeah, we have to be long-term. That's like the only way. Yeah, and of course also do what we can to fight against protectionism when it comes to custom duties or all the hidden. I mean, we set up a factory in Thailand a few years ago, and the idea to do that was to of course use the ASEAN free trade agreements to export, which in theory should work very well, but found out that in practice it was, if not impossible, it's very, very difficult.
It's interesting.
And there, of course, we need to show these examples to the policymaker and say, this is how your system works, and this was not the intention, and now you need to do something about it. But saying that is easy, doing it is extremely difficult. Right. And again, I said it earlier in my speech, I think that's also why this group is so important. Here you have a role to play. You are our network out there. And it's not just us, Scania, it's the whole industry, you know. The whole Swedish society is depending on free trade, and we can show, I mean, there's so much research done, but we could show that every country benefit. You know, and when I talk about that they should build up their local role models or their local champions, it should of course be built on global technology, and not trying to create something that, because it will never be competitive. And that's of course also an interesting reflection, again, back to Latin America. I'm sorry for that, but moving from the East Coast, which is protectionist, to the West Coast, which is open to free trade. It's not only in GDP and in quality of life, but you see the speed of development on the West Coast is so much faster than on the East Coast of Latin America. And I know it's the same in Asia. So, I mean, there's not examples or research lacking showing that free trade is the way forward. But I should acknowledge right now that's not where the world is going, unfortunately.
Perhaps a few more years before that happens. Christian, my very last question is: you spoke about meeting some fantastic finance guys at COP, I think.
Yeah, no, it was in Davos actually. Yeah.
In Davos, yes, and
Yeah.
they're from Singapore. But you've seen the investor community evolve, and how has that transition happened? There's so much stuff happening in financial sector, mayhem around green labeling. Something is green today, tomorrow it's not green.
Yeah.
And there are so many companies getting caught in the crossfire of this reputational risk nightmare bomb kind of a thing. So how do you see that conversation? Because there's no consensus. It seems, at least from my perspective. Yeah.
You're right. It's very immature. I mean, they were very late to the table, which I think is embarrassing for that industry. And when they came to the table, they came in through the ownership dimension, saying, okay, we have funds, we own equity in many of your companies, we want to influence, but that's the wrong way to go. And I think they have now realized that the way they can influence is through funding.
Yeah.
Because every company in the world needs funding. And if that funding comes at a lower cost, or if that funding at all only comes if you can show that you have a serious sustainability agenda, and then it's going to make a big impact. And that I think they have understood throughout the world. The problem, as you say, is that how do they measure that? Exactly. And there they have, of course, been also very naive and create systems, ESG measurement systems that are not at all reflecting reality. It's just a silly number of KPIs.
A checklist.
And then it's a checklist and often it's self-assessment. So we answer that checklist and there we see the company as Scania, we're not coming out very well in these ratings. We see competitors where we of course know very well where they come out much better. And that's greenwashing. And that could not be allowed, I think. And here it's about maturity. I think many of the bankers, the finance institutions on top level, they are aware. They want to improve. They realize that this will also for them be a competitive edge. But there is a long way to go. I would lie if I said something else. So we need to work with them. And that's why I met them in Davos. It's to have this conversation. But the will to change is there. So I remain also there optimistic.
Fabulous. Thank you for answering all my questions. It was wonderful. Over to you, Lisa.
Great questions.
Thank you very much. We have a number of questions from the audience. I will not be able to go through everything. Also quite a few in Swedish. Unfortunately, I will not take the time to translate those either. But I'll start with one regarding your production that you're planning to build up in China. Do you anticipate any quality concerns that the market customers may have of products produced in China versus Sweden and South America? If yes, how will you deal with that?
Yes, I do. We had the same challenge when we started to export out of Latin America into Europe, for instance. I myself made an experiment when I was MD of Italy to bring 300 trucks from Brazil, which was the first time. They only before received trucks from Europe. And they were super skeptical, so we had to give a discount, unfortunately. But what we also did, rather than give a discount on the vehicle, we made a very comprehensive repair and maintenance and warranty agreement with the customers. Showed out that these vehicles were actually on average better than the ones produced in Europe. So I think it's only through facts that you can win this discussion. So we have to just prove that and it will be, we have a global production system. We will live by the same standards. We will train the people the same way. These trucks will be exactly as good as, and perhaps with that Brazilian pride that we saw, maybe we will have some Chinese pride and actually slightly better. But for our customers, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So we will make sure in the beginning that you can also order trucks from where you get them today. And then that we will gradually ramp up, and then it will be the most natural thing in the world to have a Scania truck, no matter where it's made. And I think in Europe today, no one asks if the truck is produced in Södertälje, in France, or in the Netherlands. It's a Scania truck, and it will be the same in Asia. But yes, it will take some time, and yes, I anticipate that there will be these hurdles to overcome.
Scania has created an impressive ecosystem through partnerships, and I know partnerships are very important to you. What partners do you still lack to make the entire ecosystem around electric trucks work?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think in many markets we have partnership with the electricity providers. We're working with the grid suppliers. I think we have charging equipment to offer so that we can solve the depots. We need many more partners around the grid. There's no doubt about that. We should build out the grid. I mean, there will be tens of thousands of chargers that has to be placed throughout Asia. But what I really would like to underline, I think it's on the software side. I think we need much more partners in our software ecosystem, not only, but specifically for charging. You know, where do you find the free charger? How can we make sure that this is not a huge detour? How can we, make sure that the cost is right there? Because electricity prices are varying greatly also inside countries. I think there are many of these questions where we will not be able to develop everything ourselves. So I think software and software startups are popping up everywhere, and especially throughout Asia. And there we should hold hands. And we are building now infrastructure, so standardized interfaces, where small customers can come on our platform, start to supply services. And here I think we need to work much more.
When do you expect an electric truck to be cheaper than a corresponding diesel truck?
No, never. I don't expect that to happen, no, because the electric truck will win the race, the sustainability race in the long term, and it will be battery electric. It will not be hydrogen. That's clear. But it's going to be more expensive just because of the pure content of raw materials. And I mean, you know that raw materials are not depending on scale like industry, because they will cost the same to get out of the ground or to recircle over time, I think. Of course, it will vary, but it will always be expensive. Sorry, if we put 5 tons of batteries on a truck, there will be huge correlation between the cost of that truck and the cost of that 5 ton of material. So however we scale, it will be more expensive. How much more expensive? Yeah, we're aiming at getting the batteries down below 100 euro per kilo. 5 ton is still 5 ton. I mean, that's still 500,000, you know, and some truck application we will need 7 ton, 8 ton of battery. And then, then you come very close to the cost of the total vehicle today only for the batteries.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if we talk about raw material, also about availability, what is your strategy for problem with availability for strategic metals such as aluminium, magnesium?
Yeah, I mean, we depend on the world market, but what we do is we set up a sourcing strategy for battery cells, where we put a lot of sustainability demands on the supplier of the battery cells. And therefore our collaboration with Northvolt is so important. So you might know that Northvolt has set out to build the only CO2 neutral battery factory in the world, and there we're learning a lot. And we need to find similar types of suppliers around the world that go this way. And we're not ourselves securing aluminum or nickel or lithium. As for instance, Volkswagen is doing. The owner of our own, Volkswagen, they are now buying into Indonesian mines to secure that they have raw material available. Of course, that's fantastic if you can do it. Henry Ford did the same more than 100 years ago. But we cannot do it, too small a player to think in these terms. But that's one way, of course, to control. And then you can also control the working conditions. So all the human rights aspects you can control. So of course we are also partnering with Volkswagen in this.
Okay, I'm quite curious, and this will be the last question for today about, you know, it's well known that your attrition rate is very low. Every company prides itself with having a set of core values, and I've met many Scania employees over the years, and it's evident that the Scania way is something extra. Today we talk a lot about the great resignation, the great reshuffle. What does it take to be a great employer in 2022?
That was a tricky one. No, but I think it's the sense of belonging. I mean, the Scania house is the core of our secret sauce. It is about really creating values, stable principle, where people feel that they really count, they're really making a difference, and they really are as part of a family. I mean, everyone has their skills, everyone is different, and that's good. You know, so that's maybe it's that sense of security that is really making us an attractive employer. And then, of course, being a global player where you can work in different markets, in different functions, I mean, but that many can offer. I think what is unique to us is our culture. And I think it's that sense of belonging and that feeling of security and we are not, I mean, I would also say we are not perfect. We're not happy with our diversity situation as it is, for instance. So we need to continue to work even more on the inclusiveness to be a more diverse company.
Thank you very much. Our time is up. A big, huge thank you, first of all, to Christian for taking time to be with us today. Thank you so much. We have really appreciated, I think the discussion has been both open and candid, and to hear your take on the past few years and what's coming has been very, very, very interesting indeed. And Rima,
thanks. It's been great. It's been great also from my side. Very good discussion and conversation. Yeah, we could have been 2 hours.
Yes, we could. I think so too. It was truly fire chat here. We could go on for another hour. I also want to thank Rima. Thank you for leading this discussion. Having your expertise on both APAC and sustainability issues has really brought the discussion to another level. So thank you so much as well for your time. I would also like to send a big thank you to the Scania team in APAC and Sweden for helping us setting up this session with Christian and for being such a great supporter of Swedchamps all around the region. Swedchamp APAC will be back after the summer break with new regional events. And for our CEO talk series, we have already got confirmed Mats Ramström, Group CEO of Atlas Copco for 22nd of November. But we are also working on confirming a speaker for September, so please watch this space. And if you are in the audience today thinking that, yeah, your group CEO should really be on the stage, tell your local Swedchamp team and we will work with you to make it happen for sure. All the best to all of you, and thank you again for all of you who logged into this session with Christian Levin from Scania. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
谢谢。
谢谢。拜拜。